In the deep past, the archaeological record is full of interruptions, moments where the timeline of a group just stops. It isn't always war, and it isn't always disease that erases them. Sometimes, entire bands of people vanish into a single night, leaving behind scenes that feel less like accidents and more like crimes. This particular scene is set on a cold, exposed plain where the forest line bleeds into open tundra. It was late in the day, the sun dragging long, distorted shadows across the ground. The hunters were exhausted, muscles burning from miles of tracking migrating herds. They had pushed too far, trusting their knowledge of the terrain more than their instinct for caution. Dusk closed in with a speed that felt predatory, stealing the horizon before they could find shelter. What they couldn't see, but surely felt on the back of their necks, was that something else had been pacing them for hours. Wolves in the Pleistocene did not hunt like the animals we see in nature documentaries today. They didn't rush in with chaotic barking. They moved like smoke, testing the spacing of the group, staying just outside the radius of fear. They were reading human behavior. Footprints preserved in the stratified soil reveal a chilling geometry. The tracks do not charge in a straight line. They circle. They weave in and out of the darkness, probing for weakness, looking for the one straggler who might drift too far from the center. At first, the humans likely mistook the sudden silence of the evening for safety. The birds stopped calling. The wind shifted, carrying the heavy, musky scent of damp fur mixed with the metallic tang of cooling air. No eyes were visible, just the weight of being watched. Somewhere in that pause, the realization hit them. They were no longer the hunters deciding where to camp. They were the prey, and the trap had already closed. The evidence here gets uncomfortable. Wolves do not commit to a hunt against a large group unless that group begins to fracture psychologically. Marks near the ancient fire pits show that the flames were relit repeatedly, obsessively. This wasn't cooking fire. This was a desperate negotiation with the dark. It raises the unsettling possibility that both species were waiting for the other to blink. The wolves were waiting for the fire to die, the humans were waiting for the wolves to leave. Stone tools were found clustered in a tight radius, not dropped in a panic. This suggests the people pressed inward, shoulder to shoulder, spear points facing out. That choice runs counter to the flight instinct, yet it matches exactly what a pack predator hates most. A solid wall of resistance offers no easy meal. It is possible that this terrifying moment, not the invention of fire or language, was the test that determined whether humans could think as a single organism. Near the edge of the site, the wolf tracks thin out in one direction, while the human signs fade without evidence of a struggle. No bones were crushed, no bodies dragged away. The pursuit simply stops. It leaves a quiet question hanging over the cold ground. What happened in those final seconds when the circle opened to move? Did the humans break the standoff, or did the wolves decide the cost was too high? Some researchers believe this was the night humans learned a lesson that wolves had known for millions of years. Fear spreads faster than hunger. If panic took hold, the pack would have torn them apart. But the bones show no frantic scatter. They show controlled, deliberate movement. That absence of chaos suggests a terrifying discipline under pressure. It is the trait that separates the survivors from the ghost stories that end in silence. What is hardest to explain is why this exact geometric pattern appears in sites separated by oceans and thousands of years. It implies that these encounters fundamentally changed our species. It altered how we moved at night, how we fed the fire, how we slept. If true, this wasn't just a narrow escape. It was the drafting of a new rule for survival. Stay together, or die alone. And it leaves us wondering, in the dark of our own history, whether the wolves walked away out of boredom, or whether humans had finally become something not worth the risk of attacking. As we layer the evidence, the picture sharpens. The spacing of the footprints suggests measured steps, a fighting retreat. Even with death breathing inches away, they did not run. That control hints at trauma learned earlier, lessons carved by losses that left no traces to find. Fire remains the anchor of the reconstruction. Charcoal fragments indicate uneven, intense heat, meaning fuel was thrown on in bursts to create flares. It feels less like warmth and more like a weapon, a signal fire meant to hold the darkness back for one more minute. The wolves adjusted constantly. The depth of their tracks changes, showing where they paused, shifted weight, and lunged to test a reaction. This was not mindless hunger. It was an assessment. A calculation of calories versus injury. The absence of scattered tools is significant. Spears, scrapers, and heavy packs stayed with their owners. No one dropped their load to run faster. That detail matters because predators rely on separation. They need one target to break from the herd. Environmental pressure shaped the final outcome. The open ground ahead offered no cover for the wolves, removing their advantage of ambush. Moving into the open meant exposure to the wind, but it forced the predators into the light. This choice reflects a growing mastery of the landscape. Early humans were learning which spaces favored the pack and which spaces favored the tribe. That awareness was a weapon as sharp as any flint blade. Bones found at later camps show no signs of rushed butchering, no jagged cuts from shaking hands. The cuts are clean, deliberate, almost calm. It suggests the group survived with their nerves intact, carrying the experience forward. Over time, these patterns coalesced into instinct. Groups clustered tighter. Fires burned brighter. Camps moved to high ground. These were small adjustments, but together they formed a behavioral map that led us out of the food chain. What is missing is proof of a final battle. No wolf skeletons, no spilled blood. The encounter ends with disengagement. That void tells us something vital. Survival didn't always require killing the monster. Sometimes, it just meant outlasting its interest. In that sense, this night was a negotiation between two apex social species. Neither side won, yet one side adapted in ways that would eventually conquer the planet. The people who walked away from that plane carried a rule shaped by pressure. Control your fear. Shape the space around you. Trust the person standing next to you. It was quiet knowledge, passed on without words in the safety of the next fire. As the case deepens, absolute certainty stays out of reach. We cannot know the faces or the whispers exchanged in the dark. What remains are marks in the earth, arranged with enough intention to prove that this survival was not luck.